The discovery. The cold void of space stretched endlessly in every direction. It had been like this for millions of years, silent, undisturbed, forgotten. But today, something changed. A fleet of alien research vessels entered the dead star system, their sleek silver hulls reflecting the dim light of the dying sun. These ships belonged to the Zorveth Dominion, one of the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy. For centuries, they had ruled over weaker species, expanding their empire without opposition. But this time, they were not here for conquest. They were here for secrets lost to time. Commander Vectel, leader of the expedition, stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Void Stalker. His yellow, reptilian eyes scanned the holographic display in front of him, analyzing the data from their long-range sensors. What he saw made his breath hitch in his throat. An entire fleet of warships, colossal and ancient, drifted in the system's outer belt, hidden among the remains of shattered asteroids. Their hulls were massive, covered in layers of armor that had withstood the test of time. Even in their dormant state, these ships looked menacing. Vectel narrowed his eyes. These ships, they don't match any known civilization in the database. A scientist from the crew, standing nearby, adjusted the data feed and gasped. Commander, the material composition matches old Terran warship models. Vectel stiffened. The word Terran was rarely spoken in the Dominion. It was a name from old legends, a species that had vanished from the galaxy eons ago. The Zorvath had assumed humanity was just another weak species, but their sudden disappearance from history had always been a mystery. Terrans. Vectel scoffed, but there was unease in his voice. Impossible. Humans were wiped out ages ago. Their worlds are dead. Their fleets were destroyed. But the evidence was right in front of them. The ancient human war fleet was here, and it was intact. Vectel forced a smirk. If this was a lost relic of a dead species, then it was a gold mine. Ancient warships meant powerful technology, something the Zorvath could reverse engineer to make their empire even stronger. He turned to his officers. Prepare a recon team. Send drones to scan those ships. I want a full analysis in the next hour. As soon as the order was given, the first wave of scout drones launched from the fleet, small mechanical spheres gliding through space towards the sleeping warships. They were designed to infiltrate abandoned vessels, scanning their structures and retrieving valuable information. But as the drones approached, something unexpected happened. A strange energy reading spiked across the entire sector. It was faint at first, like a low hum in the background. But within seconds, it grew into a deep, vibrating frequency that shook the Zorvath ships. Commander, something is happening. A technician shouted from the control station. We are detecting a power surge across all human warships. Vectel's smirk vanished. He turned sharply. That's impossible. Those ships have been dead for 1,000,000 years. But the readings did not lie. Something was waking up. On the main view screen, the closest warship, a massive dreadnought, flickered with light. The once dark windows of the ship's bridge began glowing blue. The ancient engines, thought to be lifeless, rumbled with energy. And then a voice echoed through the system. It was deep, mechanical, and filled with power. Unauthorized presence detected. Identify or be destroyed. The Zorvath fleet fell into complete silence. Vectel's blood ran cold. This was no graveyard of old ships. This was a sleeping giant. And now it was awake. A deep silence fell over the Zorvath fleet. The cold void of space, once undisturbed, now carried a presence that sent chills through the crew of every ship. Something had awakened. On the bridge of the Void Stalker, Commander Vectel's reptilian eyes remained locked on the screen in front of him. The ancient human dreadnought, which had been lifeless for millions of years, was now glowing with energy. Blue lights flickered along its massive hull, and the once dormant weapons systems hummed to life. The mechanical voice that had echoed across the system still lingered in the air, its warning unmistakable. Unauthorized presence detected. Identify or be destroyed. A technician on the bridge, his hands trembling, spoke in a shaky voice. "See, Commander, the energy readings are spiking even higher. That ship, it's powering up all systems." Vectel clenched his jaw. This was not supposed to happen. The human race had been wiped out eons ago, their fleets destroyed, their planets reduced to dust. The galaxy had believed them to be extinct. So why was their warship acting like it was still standing guard? "Pull the drones back," Vectel ordered, his voice firm. "Do not provoke it further." But before the technicians could issue the recall command, the drones vanished. One moment, they were on the screen, transmitting live footage of the warship's structure. The next, they were gone, completely erased from existence. No explosion, no wreckage, just instant obliteration. A cold dread settled in the room. "Dudu, what just happened?" a Zorveth officer stammered. A warning alert flashed across the ship's systems. A single shot had been fired from the human dreadnought, a pulse of pure energy that had disintegrated the drones in less than a second. Vectel felt his scales tighten. The drones had barely entered scanning range, and the human warship had wiped them out without hesitation. "This is impossible," one of the researchers muttered. "Those ships should be ancient wrecks. Their technology should be outdated. But this is beyond anything we've seen." Vectel turned to his communications officer. "Send out a wide-frequency signal. Inform the warship that we are not here for conflict." The officer hesitated before activating the transmission. "Unidentified warship, this is Commander Vectel of the Zorveth Dominion. We come in peace. We are explorers, seeking knowledge of the past." A moment of silence followed. The tension inside the Void Stalker grew unbearable. Every crew member waited, their eyes locked on the screen, hoping for a response. And then the voice returned, this time louder. "This sector is under Terran jurisdiction. Trespassers will be eliminated." The warship's weapons glowed brighter. Targeting systems locked onto the Zorveth fleet. Panic erupted on the bridge. "Commander, it's preparing to fire." Vectel's instincts screamed at him. They needed to leave. "Reverse thrusters. Fall back. Now," he roared. The Zorveth fleet scrambled, their ships turning away from the ancient behemoth. Engines roared as they attempted to escape the deadly grip of history. But it was too late. The warship's primary cannon began to charge, energy swirling at its core. The screen flashed red with a warning. "Tar GT Locket." And then, the first shot was fired. A blinding lance of energy erupted from the ancient human warship. It cut through the void like a blade of pure destruction, heading straight for the Void Stalker. Commander Vectel barely had time to react. Evasive maneuvers. "Now," he bellowed. The Zorveth cruiser's engines flared to full power, forcing the massive ship into a desperate roll to the side. The energy blast missed, barely. The shockwave alone sent tremors through the hull, causing warning sirens to scream across the bridge. But the ships behind them were not as lucky. The second largest vessel in the Zorveth fleet, the Fang of Vorith, took a direct hit. The warship's energy shields flared for half a second, and then collapsed instantly. The impact was so powerful that the entire ship disintegrated in an instant, vaporized as if it had never existed. The bridge of the Void Stalker fell into complete silence. They had never seen firepower like this. Not even the Dominion's most advanced warships could generate this kind of destruction. The ancient human dreadnought, a ship supposedly millions of years old, had wiped out one of their strongest vessels with a single shot. Vectel's blood ran cold. This is not just an old warship," one of the officers whispered, his voice trembling. "This is a super weapon." Another alert flashed across the screen. The human warship was moving. For the first time since its discovery, the ancient vessel began to turn its massive hull, adjusting its position to face the fleeing Zorveth ships. "Commander, it's locking onto us again." Vectel gritted his teeth. They could not survive another direct hit. "Full retreat. Get us out of this system. Now." Engines roared to life. Every remaining Zorveth ship pushed their thrusters to the limit, trying to escape the human warship's targeting range. The Void Stalker led the charge, its hull groaning under the extreme stress of acceleration. But the warship was not done yet. A new energy reading flashed on their sensors. Another weapon activation. But this time, it wasn't a single concentrated blast. It was a barrage. Multiple projectiles incoming. A technician shouted. The Zorveth fleet tried to dodge, but the ancient warship's aim was terrifyingly precise. One after another, Zorveth cruisers exploded as the glowing projectiles ripped through them like paper. The explosions illuminated the dark void, sending debris scattering in all directions. The Void Stalker barely avoided destruction. One of the shots grazed its side, tearing through armor plating and sending secondary explosions rippling across its decks. Inside the ship, crew members were thrown to the floor, alarms screaming as power flickered. Commander Vectel coughed, his vision spinning as he pulled himself upright. Damage report. Severe damage to the port side. Hull integrity at 60%. But we're still operational. Vectel exhaled sharply. It was a miracle they were still alive. And yet the human warship had not moved to pursue them. Vectel narrowed his eyes at the screen. The warship's weapons were still glowing, but it had not fired another shot. It was as if it was waiting. A message flashed across the Zorveth communication system. Trespassers have been warned. Next intrusion will result in total annihilation. And then, silence. The warship ceased firing. It had made its point. Vectel's claws dug into his chair. This was not just an ancient relic. This was a guardian. And whatever its mission had been millions of years ago, it was still carrying it out. The Void Stalker limped away from the battlefield. Its hull scorched, its systems barely functioning. Smoke still hung in the air on the bridge, and the dim emergency lights cast eerie shadows on the shaken crew. Every Zorveth officer was silent, their gazes fixed on the massive ancient human warship floating in the distance. It had stopped firing, but its presence alone was suffocating. Commander Vectel clenched his fists. That wasn't just an old wreck. It was something far more dangerous. The fact that it had spoken to them, not in words, but through a direct transmission, meant it was intelligent. That wasn't just an automated defense system or a decaying relic from the past. It was still awake. It was still guarding something. "Sir, what do we do now?" one of his officers asked, voice shaking. Vectel gritted his teeth. Their fleet had been decimated. The Fang of Vorith, one of the Dominion's most powerful warships, had been vaporized in seconds. Their best weapons had been useless. Even their fastest ships couldn't outrun its targeting systems. And yet, the warship had stopped attacking. Why? Vectel turned toward his chief intelligence officer, Calaris, who was still frantically analyzing the data they had gathered. "Calaris," Vectel said, "what do we know about that thing?" Calaris hesitated, his tendrils twitching nervously. "Sir, the ship's architecture. It matches ancient human records, but this can't be possible." "What can't be possible?" Vectel snapped. "The age of that vessel." Calaris swallowed hard. "It's at least 1,000,000 years old." Silence. Vectel's eyes widened. 1,000,000. "That's just an estimate," Calaris continued. "It could be older. Much older. The materials, the design. This isn't just an old battleship from the human dominion's past. This was built in a time when humans were something else, something far more advanced than what we've ever encountered." Vectel's claws dug into the armrests of his chair. This didn't make sense. The current human dominion was already a dangerous, battle-hardened empire. Their fleets were formidable, but they had never displayed this kind of power. If humans had technology this advanced in the past, then why had it been lost? And more importantly, why was this ship still here? What was its purpose? Vectel demanded. Calaris hesitated. "We don't know. But the fact that it only fired after we got too close suggests it's guarding something." Vektel's mind raced. A warship this old, this powerful, wasn't just floating here for no reason. There had to be something in this system. Something so valuable that even after millions of years, this ancient guardian still stood watch. Was it a human colony? A weapon? Or something even more dangerous? We need answers, Vektel muttered. Scan the system again. Look for anything that could explain why that warship is still here. The crew scrambled to follow his orders. The ship's battered sensors reached out, scanning deeper into the system. And then they found something. A signal. Faint, almost buried beneath the system's radiation, but undeniably there. A human distress beacon. Vektel's heart pounded. Impossible. A beacon that old should have failed long ago. It shouldn't even be transmitting. But this one was active and deliberate. It wasn't calling for help. It was warning them to leave. This isn't a distress signal, Caleris whispered. This is a lockdown beacon. Vektel felt a cold chill run down his spine. This entire system was a restricted zone, sealed away for millions of years. And that warship wasn't just guarding it. It was enforcing an ancient order. The Zorveth Dominion had just trespassed into forbidden territory. And now, they had woken something up. The Void Stalker drifted in the dark, its battered systems struggling to function. The crew sat in stunned silence, staring at the warning beacon pulsing on their screens. A lockdown signal. A warning, not a distress call. Commander Vektel felt a chill crawl down his spine. A million-year-old human warship was still enforcing this warning. It had obliterated their fleet without hesitation, yet it hadn't pursued them. That meant one thing. They weren't the true target. Something else was hidden here. Something that had been locked away for millions of years. Vektel clenched his fists. This system is restricted. He muttered the words to himself, trying to make sense of them. But why? He turned to Caleris, his intelligence officer. Caleris, what exactly does that beacon say? Caleris hesitated, his tendrils twitching nervously as he decoded the ancient human transmission. The crew leaned in, barely breathing as his voice trembled with fear. It says, Containment Zone Alpha. Do not enter. Do not transmit. Do not wake them. A shiver ran through the bridge. Vektel narrowed his eyes. Wake who? Caleris swallowed hard. We don't know. The ship's sensors were still scanning the system, but the deeper they searched, the more anomalies they found. This wasn't just an abandoned sector of space, it was a graveyard. There were no planets here, no signs of natural resources, just an empty void and scattered debris millions of years old. And at the center of it all, buried deep beneath layers of electromagnetic interference, was an object. A structure so massive that it could only be seen in fragments. It was hidden behind shifting radiation, buried beneath cosmic dust, a colossal anomaly stretching across the void like a sleeping giant. Vektel's blood turned to ice. What is that? The bridge fell silent. Finally, Caleris found the answer. His voice was barely a whisper. Sir, it's a war vault. A war vault. Ancient records spoke of them in whispers, massive, hidden fortresses where long-extinct civilizations locked away their deadliest weapons. Some were rumored to contain entire fleets, while others held biological horrors or even forbidden technology that could tear apart reality itself. And now, they had just found one. Commander Vektel's heart pounded. A million-year-old warship was guarding this vault. A lockdown beacon had been sending warnings for eons. And yet, the Zorveth fleet had forced their way in. Vektel turned to his sensor officer. Is it active? The officer hesitated, scanning the data. We don't know, sir. But, he swallowed. Something is changing down there. We've picked up movement. Vektel's claws dug into his armrest. No, that couldn't be possible. A structure this ancient shouldn't be able to function. It should be silent, empty, lifeless. But the readings didn't lie. Deep within the vault, something was waking up. Something humans had sealed away. Vektal's mind raced. If the warship had been there to keep people out, then the vault was what it had been guarding. And now that they had breached the system, had it triggered something? The ship's alarms suddenly blared. "Sir," a crew member shouted, "we just received a new transmission." The crew tensed. Vektal's voice was sharp. From where? The officer's eyes widened. From inside the vault. A cold, eerie silence settled over the bridge. A transmission. From inside a million-year-old tomb. Vektal's breath caught in his throat. Put it through. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, a deep, distorted voice rumbled through the speakers. "Containment has failed." Vektal's blood ran cold. The transmission crackled again, the voice carrying an ancient, eerie weight. "They are waking." Then, the signal cut out, and the vault began to open. The bridge of the Void Stalker was silent. No one moved. No one spoke. The ancient transmission had echoed through the speakers like a whisper from the grave. "Containment has failed. They are waking." Commander Vektal's claws dug into the metal armrests of his chair. The weight of those words pressed down on his chest like a crushing force. The vault was opening. A structure that had remained sealed for over 1,000,000 years, a structure built by the long-extinct humans, was now coming to life. And they had triggered it. "Get me visuals on that vault," Vektal ordered, his voice tight. The sensor officer worked frantically, pulling up distorted, flickering images. The interference was immense. But even through the static, they could see it. Colossal metal doors, once fused shut by time, were now shifting. Faint pulses of energy rippled across the vault's surface, as if something inside was testing its strength. Dust and debris, undisturbed for over 1,000,000 years, began to drift into space, carried by an unseen force. The ship's sensors wailed with warning sirens. "Sir," the weapons officer's voice was sharp, "we have movement." Vektal's heart pounded. From where? The officer's eyes darted between screens. "Everywhere." Vektal leaned forward. "Clarify." The officer swallowed. His voice dropped to a whisper. "Sir, they are waking up." And then the battlefield of the dead began to stir. Across the void, the remains of ancient human warships, hulking wrecks floating in darkness for eons, began to shift. Dead ships, broken ships, ships that had no right to move. One by one, the wreckage came alive. Faint blue lights flickered in shattered hulls. Rusted weapon turrets twitched. What had once been lifeless debris was now pulsing with power. The dead fleet was waking up. Vektal watched in horror as a ship the size of a moon, a vessel that should have been nothing more than a hollow husk, began to reactivate its engines. Engines that had been silent for 1,000,000 years. The crew of the Void Stalker was frozen in shock. Calaris, the intelligence officer, barely managed to find his voice. How is this possible? Those ships. He shook his head. They should be dead. Vektal finished grimly. The ships should be dead. But they weren't. Instead, they were coming back online. The vault's doors groaned wider, revealing a dark abyss within. It was impossible to see what lay beyond, but something in that void was sending pulses of power into the ancient wrecks. And then, the first ship turned toward them. The silence on the bridge shattered. "Sir, incoming transmission." Vektal's breath caught in his throat. "Another one." "From where?" The officer's face went pale. "Sir, it's coming from the fleet." That wasn't possible. These ships were dead. Their crews had turned to dust 1,000,000 years ago. And yet, the message came through. It was barely intelligible. Distorted, broken, like a voice carried across time itself. And yet, it spoke. "You should not be here." Vektal felt a chill slither down his spine. The transmission crackled, and for the briefest moment, a face appeared on the screen. Not an alien. Not a machine. A human. The image flickered, distorted, but the outline was unmistakable. A man clad in ancient armor, his face half hidden beneath a cracked helmet. His eyes burned with something that sent a deep, primal fear through Vektal's bones. A warrior who had been dead for millions of years. A warrior who was still watching. The voice returned, filled with ancient, weary fury. You woke them. The signal cut out. And then, the dead fleet turned its weapons toward them. Sir, the weapons officer shouted. They're locking onto us. Panic erupted on the bridge. The crew scrambled as alarms blared. Every screen showed the same horrifying truth. The ancient ships were targeting them. Engines online now, Vektal barked. The Void Stalker lurched forward, its thrusters firing at full burn. They had to get out. Now. But even as they fled, the dead fleet did not pursue. Instead, they began to form a blockade around the vault, their weapons shifting toward the void beyond. Vektal watched in confusion. They're not attacking. Kalura's fingers trembled over his console. Sir, I think we misunderstood something. Vektal turned sharply. What do you mean? Kalura swallowed hard. We thought they were waking up to attack us. His voice dropped. But I don't think we were their true concern. Vektal's mind raced. Then what? And then he saw it. From the depths of the vault, something moved. Something vast. Something that had been sealed away for a reason. And now, because of them, it was free. A shadow moved within the depths of the ancient vault. Not the slow, lumbering drift of forgotten debris. Not the controlled precision of awakening warships. No, this was something alive. And it was coming. On the bridge of the Void Stalker, Commander Vektal could barely breathe. His claws dug into the armrests of his chair as he watched the massive, silent form emerge from the vault. A ship. No, a monster. The structure was impossibly large, its edges jagged and unnatural, as though it had not been built, but had grown from the very darkness itself. Its surface pulsed with a deep red glow, as if something ancient and malevolent was trapped inside, struggling to break free. For a moment, no one spoke, no one moved. Then, it sees us. The whisper came from Kalura, the intelligence officer. His voice was hollow, barely audible over the alarms ringing through the ship. And then the thing spoke. You should not have opened the vault. The voice was not a transmission. It was not a signal picked up by the comms. It was inside their minds. The entire crew felt it at once. An overwhelming, suffocating presence pressing against their thoughts. It was not human. It was not alien. It was something else entirely. Something that had been sealed away for a reason. The dead fleet reacted instantly. The ancient warships, which had been rising from their graves, turned all their weapons on the thing. Blazing blue energy lanced through the void as plasma cannons, railguns, and missile systems fired in unison. For the first time in a million years, the last remnants of the human war fleet had a target. Boom! Explosions erupted across the creature's hull, rippling across its monstrous form like waves in an ocean of fire. Debris scattered, and space itself seemed to tremble under the force of the bombardment. For a brief moment, Vektal dared to hope. Maybe, just maybe, the ancient ships had the power to destroy it. Maybe humanity's lost fleet had one final battle left in them. And then, the creature moved, faster than anything that size had the right to move. A massive, jagged tendril of dark metal and pulsing energy lashed out from the creature's body. It sliced through 3 warships in a single strike, tearing them apart like they were nothing more than insects. Vektal's heart nearly stopped. No, impossible. The human warships kept firing, relentless, unyielding. But the creature was learning. It moved through the fire, adapting, its form shifting to absorb the impacts. What once seemed like armor was something else entirely, something that grew stronger with every hit. The energy weapons that had devastated worlds did nothing. The war fleet, The last remnants of a civilization that had once dominated the stars was losing. "We have to go." Vectel barely recognized his own voice. The words felt distant, weak. But his crew responded instantly. Engines flared, and the Void Stalker turned hard, trying to break free of the battlefield. It wasn't enough. The creature turned toward them. Vectel felt it. A cold, ancient intelligence locked onto them, studying them, deciding what to do with them. Then, just as the final death blow seemed certain, a new transmission came through. It was the same voice from before, the same ghostly, human presence that had spoken from the fleet. "You are not the enemy." And then, something changed. The warships shifted formation. They were preparing for something. A final act. A sacrifice. Vectel's mind reeled as he realized what was happening. The fleet wasn't just fighting. They were buying time. For them. For anyone left alive. For the galaxy itself. "Sir," Caleris whispered, "they're going to seal it again." Vectel didn't hesitate. "Get us out of here. Now." The Void Stalker blasted away from the battlefield at maximum thrust, tearing through space as fast as its engines would allow. Behind them, the human warships launched one final coordinated strike. A blinding explosion engulfed the battlefield. The vault's doors, now cracked open, shuddered as a massive energy surge rushed back toward them. The fleet was forcing the monster back inside, with their own bodies, with their own sacrifice. The last thing Vectel saw before the void consumed them was the fading blue glow of human weapons, burning like dying stars in the endless dark. Then, silence. The Void Stalker drifted in empty space. The battlefield was gone. The vault was sealed, and the ancient human fleet vanished. No wreckage, no signals, just silence. Caleris broke the stillness. Did they do it? Vectel exhaled shakily. "I don't know. But one thing was certain. Something had been awakened in that vault. Something humanity had fought to contain millions of years ago. And even though the fleet was gone, one day it might wake up again."